You ever just walk out of a movie and the first time you see it, you're like, holy shit, this is fucking awesome. I'm loving it. I'm feeling all the emotions that you want me to feel. And then on rewatch, it just completely sucks the wind out of your sails. Yeah, I think that just happened to me with Thor Love and Thunder. Now, hold on. I still go positive on the film, but when you're watching this thing for a second time, maybe third, hell, maybe even fourth, for Thor 4, right? Some of those negatives really start to grate on you. Maybe I should reconsider what I tweet. Anyways, right, on vacation. Laurence, come in here. Come on, help me out. I need my resident Thor guy.
Whilst this movie sees Thor become the leader he was born to be, today's sponsor can help you on your path in leadership too. Conflict of Nations is a free online PvP strategy game where you can choose which real country you want to lead into battle during a modern global war. Fight up to 128 other players in real time in games that can take weeks to complete, where you can handpick different units to build and expand your army. We're talking tanks, jets, nuclear submarines, there's so much to choose from. You can forge alliances with other players, or you can bring the heat down on your neighbours by declaring war, all whilst choosing your own strategy for total world domination. One thing that I love about this game is its ability to use the same account across your PC and also your mobile device, meaning that I'm always advancing, whether I'm out and about or not. To get started today, why not click the link in the description to get 13,000 gold and 1 month of premium subscription for free as an exclusive gift for you. But you may want to hurry, this offer is only available for 30 days, so what are you waiting for? Hit the link, choose your country, and fight your way to victory now. Okay, let's talk about Thor 4, the fourth Thor.
Okay, here we go. I liked this movie, guys. Now hold on. Before you start losing your minds, throwing your hammers, and smiting me with the power of the gods, I'd like to temper my initial reaction to this film. Thor Love and Thunder is good.
But it can be better.
It's sincere, it's honest, it's wholesome, it's entertaining and fun, but upon rewatch, I also recognize that there's a lot wrong with this film. The highs still worked for me, those emotional beats are still incredible and make for some of the most I've felt in a Marvel movie since, God, I don't know, Endgame or so? But the lows also are incredibly low, and not just the visuals, which we're going to get into, but a lot of the comedy, it could be better, right? It could be better. Look, the Marvel fatigue is setting in for just about everyone right now, including me, even though I've liked a fair few of the Phase 4 projects that we've gotten thus far. But that being said, the tiresome ride of watching 5 movies and 5 shows each year with the understanding that it all somehow ties into an overarching story that still doesn't seem to be forming is getting pretty exhausting. I think even the most die-hard MCU stans can admit that it can sometimes feel like a chore to tune in. I get that. I totally do. Most of the time, I'm right there with you. But for as far as Love and Thunder is concerned, I do have to disagree with the masses to an extent, even if I can fully understand where they're coming from. It feels like Taika Waititi refined his Ragnarok reimagining of Thor and presented us with a movie that felt wholly in line with the progression of the character, as well as going out of its way to enhance the previous movies through new light shed on dynamics we never thought we'd see again. It highlights Thor's emotional journey in a similar way to the first Thor movie, or this perfect scene in Infinity War, and personally, while there's, some stuff wrong with the film, I think it does a hell of a lot more right than it does wrong. From a more direct and focused script, if you can believe it, to who is now one of the all-time great MCU villains, to the fact that I actually shed a damn tear in one of these assembly line products for the first time in shit, I don't know,
3-4 years?
8 years, 7 months and 6 days, give or take.
I couldn't have been in more of a shock watching Love and Thunder. Maybe that's because I hated the trailers. Maybe it's because my expectations were really low, but expecting 2 hours of non-stop meaningless bathos, the shtick that made Ragnarok funny at the expense of, quite literally everything else. I was instead presented with a story that held up my philosophy on art and entertainment in general, which is that it's always better to choose love. To open your heart to the good stuff, even if you get burned along the way or for doing so. Love and Thunder focuses on fleshing out Thor's recent ongoing arc of loss. Having lost his dad, his brother, his mom, his brother again, his friends, his brother, his hammer, his planet, his brother, and his people, and then being the guy that caused the loss of half of the universe. Thor is utterly aimless, without purpose, and devoid of any care for obtaining one. From the start of the cinematic universe, Thor has consistently been been pulled in different directions to assist the people of Earth, to defend the 9 realms, to rule Asgard. He consistently had goals, objectives, people who depended on him, but now, free from those responsibilities, he begins to realize that after thousands of years, he still doesn't quite understand who he is. He's lost. He's having a midlife crisis, borderline alone, waiting for others to call upon him for aid, for someone to show him any sort of affection and adoration. Thor is a god starved of love, but not the love of disciples, an intimate, personal love he can call his own that makes him feel like his life has meaning, that he is worthy. This film may not be for everyone. Hell, like I just mentioned, I watched it again last night and I walked away enjoying it less than I initially did. Seriously, fucking goats, man? Come on, dude. Is this mom humor? What's going on here? But in the end, the heart of this classic Thor adventure is undeniable, and it willed out as I choose to embrace the film's grand, sappy, silly, hopelessly romantic gestures of love and purpose. Taika Waititi's reinvention of Thor finally kind of, it's a little rough around the edges, but it essentially works for me. I get it. It makes sense. It's quirky, it's different, it's a bit less interesting than Branagh's original take, but it's human to the very core. Flawed and overflowing with emotions, which is why I truly believe that Thor Love and Thunder is actually a good MCU movie.
We open this movie with gore, played beautifully by Christian Bale, as if anyone expected anything less. Starved, exhausted, and on his last legs, he prays to his god, counting on his undying devotion to free his daughter from such a needless demise. His prayers go unanswered, and in one of the coldest MCU openings of all time, we cut from a desperate father cradling his dying daughter to the defeated father with his arm outstretched across her grave. Whether it was the blunt imagery or Bale's performance, this was such an inspired way to open this movie. This, paired with the confrontation of his god seconds later, it's really difficult as an audience member not to land on the side of gore here, bearing in mind that we still know he's the main antagonist of the movie. In his mind, gods are out for themselves, complacent, cowardly, hypocritical, and unworthy of their power and status. And the movie's framing is really just proving his point. Instilled with a newfound purpose, Gore denounces his god, kills him, and swears that all gods will die by his hand. But speaking of purpose, Thor has, well, none. We pick up with him still adventuring with the Guardians as a warrior to be called on when he's needed in a fight. Having completely lost the passion for what he does, he's almost reverted back into his careless self from the first Thor movie. He's not being a dick or anything, he's just reckless in battle, tearing through the objectives without a second's thought if it means defeating the bad guys and then being showered with the adoration that he so desperately craves. He puts on this big show every time, which is transparently just masking his inner sadness and the truth that he's way too afraid to admit to anyone. That he's lost all sense of self, and all the trauma inflicted upon him has taken a very heavy toll. No longer an Avenger, no longer a king, he's just aimlessly traveling, trying to do good to fix the hole in his life that could only ever be filled by love and companionship. The trouble is, he won't open himself up again after losing it so many times. He's lived such a long life and has had all the time in the world, but what does time matter when you're not using it to do anything? Life isn't solely measured in how long someone lives, but rather what they do with the time that they have gifted to them. This is the polar opposite of what Jane is going through. Having been gifted with extensive knowledge and the experiences that allow her to change the world through her scientific breakthroughs, she's been diagnosed with cancer and has a limited time to achieve her remaining goals. Her great conundrum, reinforced by Thor later on, is the choice between recovery and rest for a potential lifetime of achievement, or the certainty of utilizing her time now to make a difference, even if it means cutting that time short. With some new context on Thor and Jane's relationship, we begin to peel back the layers on Phase 1 and 2's least fleshed out pairing. Having the story of their breakup played for laughs in Ragnarok, this film recontextualizes that breakup as the loss of normality and stability that grounded Thor and made him worthy in the first place. When Thor is reintroduced to Jane, he immediately presents a front and overcompensates with his costume. He expresses his jealousy that Mjolnir is bending to Jane's will but not his. It's almost like he shut off the memory of how this is even possible, how Thor's love for Jane is the sole reason that Mjolnir answered the call in the first place. He'll do anything to avoid an acknowledgement of pain which he's desperately tried to bury, and in doing so it becomes clear how strong his feelings still are for her. He's terrified of opening up again in fear of losing her just like he did before, but like Peter Quill told him, it's better to have loved and lost and feel shitty than to have never loved at all and just feel empty. After Gore kidnaps the Asgardian children and our protagonists head to Zeus for assistance, we see Thor come to a slow realization. His hero, a man whom he deeply admired, is nothing short of a coward, too scared to use his power in fear of being on the business end of Gore's sword. Thor witnesses firsthand the complacency of the almighty beings, and and just like Gorr's prayers, Thor's request for help falls upon deaf ears, which opens his eyes to the example he may set for those who admire him. Thor defeating Zeus with his own weapon symbolizes Thor killing a part of himself that's unwilling to love, that's too scared to intervene, the old god inside of him. He's confronted with the responsibility to save the children, who revere him as a true god and a known hero, and when he steps up to the plate, he's willing to lay it all out for his newfound purpose. He fights for them twice as hard, knowing that the lack of compassion shown by other gods is the cause for this current suffering. He shrugs off his disappointment in Zeus, stating that people just should never meet their heroes. Unbeknownst to him, that his perseverance to the children's safety has cemented his legacy to them as their own hero, a god who they can truly look up to, who is worthy unlike so many of those that came before. However, the children aren't the only people inspired by recent actions. As much as this film is definitely an examination of love and how best to live with the finite amount of time we have with those that we cherish the most, it also goes out of its way to look at the selfless love we have for those who we hold close and how we pay that love forward through selfless acts. In a sense, Jane was Thor's true hero, not because she could lift the hammer or fly, but because she taught him to care, to love, and to be worthy of his power, to do things that matter not just for himself but for those around him, to be responsible, to be worthy of his title as a god and never fall short of people's expectations and trust in him. She found Thor at his lowest on 2 separate occasions throughout their time together, and twice she brought him back and restored him to a man, to a god that he could be proud of, that he could look in the mirror and love. He finally becomes the leader that Odin wanted him to be in this film, lacking the nobility of a king, sure, stripped away from his grandeur, throne and crown, or helmet, or whatever. None of that matters. What matters is that he made the right choice, to love and to inspire, to lead and to protect his people no matter the personal cost. Not only does Thor inspire the kidnapped children, but he imbues them with the power of Thor should they be worthy, just as his father once did for him. He inspires Heimdall's son Axel to hone his father's power, teaching him to embrace the love from whom he lost and honor his memory by carrying a part of him forward and using it to help. When Jane sacrifices herself to save Thor, she chooses love, and unknowingly sparks the seed of doubt in Gorr. He's confronted with the question that will truly define what sort of father he is. Should he avenge his daughter and kill every god for the lack of compassion that his showed him? Or should he restore her life to an imperfect world and reclaim his faith in a god to protect her going forward? His past experiences should absolutely implore him to act out of vengeance, but being open to love means taking a chance. It means to have faith in someone, and Thor's newly pronounced attitude reflects those of a man who seeks the same as him, to use his power to be good, to be better than those he used to worship, and to filter his passion and love into meaningful relationships. Thor truly grows into a man that his father would be proud of. Just as Odin once took Loki in from the battlefield and provided him a second chance at life, Thor does the same for Gorr's daughter, which I think is really incredible and a great piece of storytelling.
Fuck, man, you're gonna make me tear up again just thinking about all this stuff. It's so good, but it's not all good. And you know what? I think I'm just gonna jump in here while I'm on my way back from vacation, and we're gonna talk about some of the visuals, the filmmaking, and just overall a lot of the stuff that didn't really work for me in this film. You know, I'm gonna take it from here.
It's time to talk about the man behind it all, Taika Waititi. The guy serves as both the director and the writer in this one, which I think elevates it greatly from his first foray into the MCU. For everything I enjoy about Ragnarok, which is a very short list, I do find it incredibly funny at times. But the trade-off is the jokes never stop, and it's at the expense of some of the most emotional moments we've ever gotten in a Thor film. And that's great, you know, the comedy is really enjoyable if you love that sort of thing. Hell, I love a good comedy too, but it also feels tonally removed from what the story was attempting to do. Ragnarok deals with Thor's reconciliation with Loki, where the two brothers finally find common ground. It also teaches us that, as special as something may be, it doesn't mean a thing without the people who make it so. Both brilliant story beats for a Thor movie, but it was sometimes hard to grasp onto them due to the excessive amount of riffing going on. Taika isn't credited as a writer on Ragnarok, and so the comedy isn't interwoven throughout the story. It doesn't feel natural. It feels like improv sketches that missed a good exit line, and so just continue to crack zingers until every ounce of comedic potential has been explored. Again, this isn't necessarily a bad thing, it just wasn't for me for the most part. Ragnarok often feels like it didn't know when to end the jokes, whereas Love and Thunder, for the most part, has a stern grip on when to let the comedy take the backseat in favor of crafting a more sincere moment. Allowing the emotional beats some room to breathe also works to elevate the humor when it does come into play. This is still a funny movie at times, but the jokes are structured properly, written within the context of scenes, and therefore have a payoff that feels in line with the moment rather than undercutting it. Except for those goddamn fucking goats. God. And I get it. I know why people will probably prefer Ragnarok to Thor Love and Thunder. It's because it's a funny movie, and even if the story isn't working for you, even if the emotional payoff is completely undone by Hulk jumping out of a plane and smacking his face onto a rainbow bridge, people are able to look past it and probably don't give a shit because they're just having such a good time watching these actors do what is essentially sketch comedy. It's meta, it's almost the anti-Thor movie in a sense, and for some reason people really like when these films poke fun at some of the more sincere and emotional moments that have previously happened, but I digress. The point is, Ragnarok is a more crowd-pleasing film that anyone can realistically enjoy, whether or not they've watched a Thor film or not. Due to having more creative freedom with the script, Taika is also able to move past the basic riffing that Ragnarok was guilty of and, throw in some other moments that feel a bit more planned. At least kind of planned for the most part. This still does feel like people just dicking around, pointing a camera, saying funny lines, and then moving on to the next shot, but for the most part, there's some funny moments in here that can literally just be like an axe entering into the frame, or an overcompensating Thor summoning the most outlandishly Thorish costume to try and one-up his ex. The core difference between this and Ragnarok is that if this particular brand of comedy isn't your taste, there's something beyond that to hold on to, an emotional beat to bring you back on board, as opposed to Ragnarok's relentless riffing in an attempt to conceal the insincere emotional integrity of the script. Sadly though, for everything Love and Thunder provides on an emotional front, it lacks severely when it comes to the medium of film. As with a lot of Disney projects at the moment, it often feels like shots were achieved in the easiest, fastest way possible, which is disheartening when it comes from a company with considerable resources. How can a $250 million movie look this bad? It's baffling to me that the man that made Jojo Rabbit, What We Do in the Shadows, Hunt for the Wilder People, and Boy was comfortable letting certain shots in this movie make the final cut. And whether that's just being forced to play ball in the Marvel machine and over-reliance on the volume technology, or just Disney not allocating VFX artists the time and money they deserve for their craft, the results speak for itself. Visually, this film feels about as lazy as you can get, and it honestly speaks to Marvel's final metamorphosis into becoming the most expensive TV show ever made. And it's a shame considering the high bar which was set in previous iterations of the Thor saga. I truly think this speaks to how Taika Waititi views these movies. It's a great paycheck. It's gonna allow him to finance other projects that are like Jojo Rabbit, but it's also at the expense of a quality film. I've seen this from a few people, but essentially what Thor Love and Thunder amounts to is a bunch of people who are really talented, who are great friends, and they have a great time working on a group project, but then the thing that they turn in is just kind of half-assed because they wind up just enjoying spending time with one another, dicking around, having fun, and they kind of lose sight of what it is they're doing in the first place. For some truly great emotional highs, like again, seriously, some of the most emotional stuff in an MCU film, this movie also lowers the standard for creativity in visual expression with some of the ugliest, seriously, like straight up grossest presentation Marvel has been guilty of in a while. Now that that's out of the way, there were some aesthetic choices that I did really enjoy about the film. Love and Thunder definitely does a much better job of authentically capturing the 80s pastiche, Masters of the Universe, Flash Gordon vibe it was going for. Where Ragnarok's marketing presented an 80s feel, it was mostly absent from the movie, with the exception of the soundtrack and score. And let me tell you, that score was fucking awesome. Love and Thunder, however, leans far more into this stylization, incorporating it into the movie on almost every level. Yeah, it's a bit of a Guardians ripoff. Yeah, it's not the most groundbreaking palette, but, it gets the job done, and it at least feels more confident in that regard. But, it's also present in the costumes and overall story. The first two costumes Thor wears in this movie totally fit here, and I almost wish they would have doubled down on that more because they work with not only where Thor Thor is on a character level, but in service of the film, achieving the look it's aiming for. There also is, contrary to what the internet may tell you, some striking imagery here. Nothing I'm gonna want to frame on my wall, but when Taika does decide to utilize color or the absence of it, it is effective. And maybe that's just because everything else is so unremarkable, but it works. The hair, the shadowy monsters, the cosmic globetrotting, it's all good stuff. And it comes across as though they've hit the nail on the head of what they were aiming for the most part. What did not land at times, however, was the breakneck pace. That didn't quite mesh with the utter chaos on screen at times. I guess what I'm trying to say is that with Ragnarok, it felt like Taika Waititi was riffing with the writing. Here, it feels like Taika Waititi was just riffing with the visuals. He has a more concrete idea of the story he's trying to tell. He understands the broad strokes, he understands the emotional beats he wants to hit, and the emotional character moments he wants to allow play out, but the overall look and the connective tissue is a bit careless and carefree. Whew, alright, I'm dizzy. I'm literally recording in a closet with clothes around me. I gotta get out of here. Alright.
Look, ultimately, as with any body of work, this may simply just not be your cup of tea, which is fine. But for the people that love it, I think this is genuinely what we've been waiting for a long time. It's become almost a special occasion for an MCU villain to stand out, for their story to coincide and complement the protagonist so well like this does. It's also become a rarity for a central love interest to become a character as interesting in their own right as our titular hero, who not only enhances the key themes of the movie, but brings forth their own satisfying arc that provides them agency and relevance. This movie, to me at least, brings me back to the more character-focused entries from Phase 1. Sure, it has all the practical skill of Phase 4, which is disappointing, but we finally return to a place where the thing that matters most is character, story, and how those two are interwoven with each other, as opposed to cameos, endless bathos, and treading water until the next big Avengers team up. This movie proves that standalone titles are worth making, that sometimes a man struggling and overcoming his fear can be more captivating than just about anything else. This is also the first time that the MCU has trusted a character's growth to extend beyond the confines of a trilogy or just a subsequent tie-in Avengers movie, and I for one really hope that this second era of Thor continues in this direction, aided by the new path that this movie forged for him. Oh, and before I go, just a quick reminder about our amazing sponsor, the incredible free online PvP strategy game that is Conflict of Nations. Clicking our link in the description will grant you the exclusive gift of 13,000 gold as well as 1 month's premium subscription, all for free. With this offer only lasting 30 days, you really don't want to miss it. So join up, choose your own strategy, and fight your way to victory today. And also thank you again to Conflict of Nations for sponsoring this video.